Hi, everybody. So we got out a little bit early today, and I ate dinner, and I'm ready to go. Actually, I ate dinner near the courthouse, and Abby's mom was there. And as always, I like to start with this photo of Abby and Libby because their perspective on this case is a lot different than ours. At the time, in the bar or the restaurant, two TV screens were playing coverage of this murder, and Abby's mom was there. And just to remind everybody that their perspective is so much different than ours. So let's remember that this is about them and not us. So here we go. So I do not have as many notes as today, and my lighting is a little bit better. If you hear background noise, it's cars and trucks going by. So that's that. I'm sure we'll hear a train or two. So today's October 30th. Before I start, I have some comments. I'm going to start with page 188, and then I go to page 209. How much that equals, I don't know. So here we go. Oh, somebody in the line this morning, cot lady. There's two ladies who have been sleeping on cots, and I call them cot ladies, or somebody else did. They're very nice to me, and they might be giving me some updates next week. Um, so she said, "Did you when Richard Allen was interrogated by Jerry Holman on October 26, 2022? So at some point, Rick's wife came in. Can somebody say yes so you can hear me? I'm always afraid that I'm going to talk for 3.5 hours and then you guys can't hear me. Just one yes. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I can't say hi to everybody because I know you guys want to hear what happened, and I want to get it to you as soon as possible. One person write the word yes. We can hear you. Okay, thank you, JM. Here we go. So this woman in line said, "Did you hear when Kathy Allen went into the interrogation room October 26th and Jerry Holman left? It was just Rick and his wife. Did Kathy say, 'You didn't tell me you were on the bridge?'" And I could have swore that she did say that, but I might not have written it down or described it last night. Her voice was very low in this audio. The actual audio itself was low, and she was crying, so her voice was not really strong. So I'm not certain that she did say, "You didn't tell me you were on the bridge." But what I think is important about that is that was October 26th, which was 13 days after their house was raided. So in those 13 days, Rick just only told her that he was on the trails and not on the bridge. And not just those 13 days, but in 5.5 years since the murders. I don't know. So today was interesting. There were three witnesses. This woman, Dr. Walla, who did testify this summer, July 30th to August 1st, and then she lost her job because she used the prison system, the computer system, to look up information about Kegan Kline. I'm not going to say what I just thought. And she got fired for that because she's not supposed to look up records of people she's not taking care of as a psychologist. So she was most of the day, and we were wondering if the next one would be the confessions on audio and on the phone that Rick did. It did not happen today. So then Steve Mullen came back for the third time to talk about the Hoosier Harbor Store camera in Rick's car. There was an update on that. And finally, the next and last witness is Brad Weber, who we've been wanting to hear about for a long time. I've had some screenshots about Brad Weber's timeline from that day, and today what he said was a little bit different. So I'll get to that in maybe an hour. Hopefully this live chat, at least hopefully for me, it won't last 3.5 hours like last night. So here we go. Today, October 30th, started out for a sidebar for like at least 15 minutes. Judge Gull was late for something. She said she had some logistics. So we did not start with the jury until almost 9:30, 9:29. So here goes Dr. Monica Walla. Today, Diener was talking to Dr. Walla, and then Rosie would cross-examine her. So as always, a brief background and history on these people. Monica Walla, clinical psychologist, has a doctorate in psychology, a master's in counseling. She's a licensed clinical psychologist in Indiana. Exhibit 302 was her resume or CV, whatever you want to call it. Diener said in 2022 to 2023, you were employed at Indiana Department of Correction as the lead psychologist. Her employer was not Department of Correction, it was Centurion, which is like a vendor. And so she was technically a contractor working for Westville. I just put my bare feet on this wooden desk, and I didn't want to kick it during the live chat and scream, so that's that. Her resume, she primarily worked at the Westville facility, the prison. She would take on more serious cases, like more serious inmate issues. She met with Richard Allen and worked with other mental health professionals helping Rick. I'm trying to read my notes as always. Something level mental health professional assisted later. Oh, a master's level a master's level mental health professional assisted later, which may have been Rick getting medication from a psychiatrist. Diener, how did you start working with Rick? I guess she said, Walla replied, assumed I would take on the case with Richard Allen, because I guess, like I said, she would take on the most serious cases at Westville. Diener, sorry, I have to figure out what I wrote. Move? I don't even know what that is. What the hell? Awkward. Move time interviews? I don't know. She said yes. Yeah, I missed that one. Sorry. And then I missed the next question, but Walla replied, there was no one other than Richard Allen I would see, which that's awkward. I don't understand what that's all about. Diener, would you prepare documents from your sessions? And Walla said yes, and I would input them. I would type them on the system right after I got back from the session, where I would write it on a piece of paper. So Diener said, did you have a computer in your sessions with Richard Allen? She said no. I would take notes on a pad, and I would put in the system at my desk immediately after. Diener, did you have a computer with other inmate sessions? And Walla said yes, but Rick was different. Diener, where would you meet Rick? So Rick was in the A pod at Westville, and they would meet in a cubicle, which later on, Rosie calls it a cage. Diener said, would you actually see each other through this gate or whatever? And Walla said yes. So that's page 188 of 209. Page 189 of 209. Was Rick shackled when you would meet him? She said no. Once he got to the cubicle, he would be unshackled. How long after your session would you enter your notes? Walla said the same day she would put it into the computer system. Diener said there's something called an addendum report, and said, like, when will you do that? And Walla said it would depend if I saw him again the same day. Diener showed a binder, which was exhibit 303, and asked if she recognized what was in it. Walla said yes, those are my documents from her sessions with Richard Allen. Diener, when starts November 2022, essentially when he first got to Westville. Exhibit 303 starts April 5th, 2023, and Walla said yes, that's correct. So on April 5th, Diener said on April 5th, what identifies who you were meeting with? So Diener, I apologize, Walla looked at the binder with papers and said each paper would say the patient's name, date of birth, the date of their visit, and the visit type. Diener said, would you see Richard Allen daily? Yes. What was the reason for the placement section on this log? Walla said it outlines the person is on suicide watch and the level of suicide watch. Diener, what does close observation mean? Walla said it means that they're not watched at all times, but every 15 minutes. So later on, we learn close observation every 15 minutes. Constant observation is when a guard or inmate companion is sitting outside Rick's cell constantly. Diener said, would you refer to the suicide companion logs? And Walla said yes. So these companions would sit outside Rick's cell all the time, write what he said and did. They would hand it in, and it would eventually get to Dr. Walla. Diener, did you gather information from the Did you gather information from the suicide companion logs? Yes. Diener, would you indicate your observations as well? Walla said, not in this section of the log. So Diener says on April 4th, his level of watch changed. And Walla said, yes, he was placed on suicide watch April 4th, 2023. So Diener talked about Rick came from the RDC, which is the Reception Diagnostic Center. So normally when somebody is convicted, they would go to this Reception Diagnostic Center, RDC, and they'll be examined by whoever's there. And then I guess they determine which prison they're going to go to and under what conditions. So even though Rick obviously did not get convicted, he went to this after the safekeeping order was instituted. So Walla said Rick remained on suicide watch at Westville for 1 month. She said the end of December through April, and she would see him once a week. Some of that timing did not add up to me. Sorry. Well, what do we got here? Diener said videotaped when he would be moved from his cell. Please stand by as I'm trying to decipher. Yes, sir. If you're new here, I write as fast as I can, the questions and the answers. Sometimes I miss stuff. Sometimes I'm writing so fast I can't read it. So please bear with me. What ins act change? I guess what act caused a change from Rick to go from close contact to close observation to constant observation? I guess the only difference is that she said it's a very little difference between what they're actually doing, other than instead of 15 minutes, it's actually all the time somebody at Rick's cell door. Diener said, can you compare close observation to constant? And so Walla said, constant is more severe. It means imminent harm is what they think the inmate might do to themselves. And so they placed Rick on a closer watch. And then things had taken a turn, but not to the point of imminent change where he would harm himself. So I don't know, there's some kind of conflicting testimony there, or my writing is conflicting. So Diener said he confessed to the charges, and Walla said yes. Diener, Rick's watch level, would that affect his level of personal property that he has access to in his cell? Diener described something like they would monitor his shower usage, his mattress, and a safety blanket he would have. He would have a kimono, which is like, they said it's like a smock, like the Flintstones, like Fred Flintstone would wear. That's not a joke. They actually said that. Something about regular meal and then commissary. Dr. Walla said, I wanted him to have his stuff. So she seemed to really care about Rick and his mental well-being. Diener said, Dr. Walla, you had no control over his cell or his movements, but you did have control over like what kind of personal property he would have in a cell. Walla said they don't give utensils for somebody who's on suicide watch. They would give them a styrofoam tray since it is more safe. Diener said there's a section on this form called patient complaint, and Walla said yes. And then Diener said, how would you begin your session with any client, or more specifically, Richard Allen? I would ask how he was doing. Diener, did you talk with him about not discussing the case? And Walla said yes early on. She said, you should only talk about the case with your attorneys, no other inmates, nobody else. That obviously didn't happen. Page 190 of 209. Diener's question was, something ever asked questions about blank? The answer was no. I totally missed the next question. Diener then said, do you believe Richard Allen knew the dangers of talking about this case? Walla said, it depends what point in time you're talking about. Diener, do you think Richard Allen is intelligent? And Walla said yes. Diener said at one point Richard Allen had a job that involved management skills, and Walla said yes, he did tell me that. I'm not sure what that is there. Diener, on this date, Richard Allen talked about the case. Walla said yes, but I did not prong it, P-R-O-N-G. Oh, no, maybe I'm sorry, I did not prompt it. So Rick just started talking about the case on its own. So there's an April 15th report, and then there's an objection from the defense, and it was sustained by Judge Gall. Diener, did Rick make a statement? I have the word include, and then I guess Walla said he stated, quote, I killed Abby and Libby. I'm something, I missed the end of it. Actually, so Diener may have said something like, did Rick make a statement that I killed Abby and Libby, something else? And then Walla's answer was yes. Then I missed the next question. I wrote, how sure, but I didn't hear the rest of it. The acoustics and stuff are not that good in this courtroom. They're horrible, actually. I don't know why they're spending $72,000 on a podium, but they can't figure out the audio and speakers for the families to hear what's going on. Moving along. Diener, does Richard Allen see you have paper and pen when you're interviewing, not interviewing him, but giving a session? And she said, yes, he sees that I'm like taking notes. Diener, Rick became tearful. Yes. He said he committed the murders alone. He made sure they were dead because he didn't want them to suffer. Did he indicate anybody helped him? And Wallace said he did not indicate. Did he say he did it alone? Yes. Did he talk about whether he knew the victims were deceased before he left the scene? Wallace said yes. Did he say his intentions? Wallace said sexual in nature. Did he know, this is Diener, did he know the age of the victims? Wallace said he thought they were at least 18 or 19. And then she said something else. I could not hear what she said. Diener, did Rick give an indication why he killed them? I didn't get all this, but I think she said something like he was selfish all his life and something about proving something. As always, I suggest you really not pay attention to me, but look on like Indiana newspaper websites or their news broadcasts. There's a pool of media that have to share all their notes. They're sitting in the front row. They can hear better than me in the back row. So they have better accurate quotes than I do. But you're not going to get like a line by line from them. What do we got here? Diener, did he say how he feels now? Wallace said he wants to apologize to the family of the victims. And also, he wished he could have changed his actions. Page 191 of 209. Diener said something about a sexual intent. That was her question. I could not hear Walla's answer this time, but later on she does say, and she does give the more detailed confession, whatever you want to call it, maybe in a half hour. Diener, Rick said he was molested as a child. There may have been also a reference that Rick said he molested his sister. I'm not sure about that quote. He said he also experimented with male and females his age when he was younger. Then there was some kind of reference to that was when the problem began. Diener said, does Rick have a drinking history, aka alcohol? Wallace said he was an alcoholic twice since 2011. He was an alcoholic. Diener said, did Rick mention anything about religion? Rick said he allowed God in his heart March 21st, 2023, so like 2 weeks before he started confessing. Walla continued, Rick asked if I believed in God. He wanted to reference the Bible, and I think she said Psalm, which is, for people who don't know, Psalm. I think she said 23, Psalm 23. Diener said, what would he do with the Bibles? Wallace said he hoped to give them to the families of Abby and Libby. And then she may have said to like help other people in need. Diener, did he express remorse for his actions? Wallace said he wished he could go back and change his actions. Diener, how is he doing at the Department of Corrections and how is his mental health? This is interesting. Diener said that Rick said he was glad he had not killed himself. He hoped he would see his family and they would forgive him. He is happier than he's ever been in his life in this terrible place. Something along the lines of that. That was interesting. Diener says, is religion something new to you? And Wallace said, yes, he would he would ask to speak to the chaplain. Oh, sorry. So Walla had been talking to Rick since November 2022. Diener wanted to know, was Rick bringing up the topic of religion, something new in your sessions? I think that was essentially what she was saying. Walla said yes. He would ask to speak to the chaplain. He slept with his Bible, read the Bible. It was important to him. Diener, there's a patient complaint objective section on the logs. And Walla said it references various risk factors. So Walla talked about a clinical observation section. She, I guess, described Rick as solemn, calm, bizarre smile, which I saw that yesterday when he's looking at his wife and she didn't smile back. Relapses, sharing information, demonstrated, I think she said religiosity. Never heard that term. She said I don't even know what she said, like religiosity, whatever, an interest in religion that was not present before. Diener, sudden shift is blank, I missed it. And she said potentially feigning, which I believe is spelled Feighning, which essentially means faking. Was Rick faking his crazy symptoms? There's some kind of, Walla said something like there was a report that he drank water out of the toilet. He said he may have been delirious from not eating. Diener said something about manipulative, and I could not hear the question, the full question, or the answer. Here's a break. Fun fact, or not fun fact. When I was in grammar school, I fell asleep and I had a nightmare that I was on an elevator with the entire cast of the TV show Fame. And because there's so many people on it, it started to fall to the ground. So I woke up, and I guess my mom told the lady next door, who her daughter was also my grade. So like the next day, we were all, remember the lights were out. It's like second grade. We were waiting to leave for the day. And the girl next door said, Tommy was delirious. And I was like, oh God, help me. All right, moving along. Diener, when confessing, was this the first time he made a statement to you? Maybe when confessions, first time made statement to you. Walla said, I don't remember. Diener, on this day, were you aware? So on the day that Rick made this confession, I guess April 5th or the 4th, I think it's the 5th. On this day, were you, Dr. Walla, aware he had made statements to suicide companions and the warden? Yes, Walla was aware. There was some kind of reference to Rick's appearance, but I did not hear the full question or the answer. I wrote next for Diener, eye contact, and Walla's reply was intense. Sometimes intense was normal, staring, gazing, intermittent. And a lot of people in the courtroom say Rick does that continuously now. Diener, what was the mental status categories? Any of concern to what he said that day? Walla said his emotions were up and down, go off on a tangent and never return, or sometimes come back around. Page 192 of 209. Diener said, did Rick relate his confession in chronological fashion? Walla said yes. Was he concise or tangential? He was concise. Did you feel like he was having hallucinations or delusions? Actually, that may not be true. I wrote down hallucinations or delusions section on the form, and Walla said correct. Diener said, what was your assessment? Walla said he was not suicidal. Questions about drinking from the toilet. Diener, expectations you would think. I wrote down expectations and anxiety. You would think Richard Allen something. Walla's reply was meaningful work on mental health concerns and, oh no, that's wrong. Sorry. So Diener said something like, what was your expectations of your work, like trying to do these sessions with Richard Allen? And Walla said, I was trying to do meaningful work on Rick's mental health concerns like depression and anxiety. The next question was like, on this form, there's a plan section. Walla said repeats items. Diener said report was dated May 2nd, 2023, and there was a patient complaint. And on that day, May 2nd, she met Rick in the A pod cubicle. So on that day, May 2nd, Diener said, how was Richard Allen's ability to communicate that day? Walla said he was very tangential and focused on concepts. Wiener said, Wiener, I need a nap. Yeah, I was falling asleep this morning and this afternoon, but luckily I did not fall asleep in court. Wiener. Okay, here we go. Diener said Rick made a statement. I guess he said he made statements about Abby and Libby. And Walla said, yes, he did make statements as follows. I killed Abby and Libby. I will kill everyone, ... I missed it. He mentioned starting World War III. He said, is it okay to kill myself? Because the other inmates were telling him to kill himself. So he said, is it okay if I kill myself? He did not want to die. I wrote, he could climb, C-L-I-M-B, maybe onto a sink and jump off or something. I'm not sure. Continuing, he said, I killed myself by something, my entire family and friends. I'm too much of a coward to kill myself. Diener said, did you take them to be confessions? And about these last things where he's saying, I killed myself and my entire family and my friends, Diener said, did you take those statements to be confessions? And Walla said, it was more of a metaphor for the situation. Like, because of Rick's actions, he's like ruined his entire family. The next section for Diener was about feces and drinking water. Like Rick was smearing feces on his face and body. The only thing I wrote down for Walla's reply was because I was afraid I wouldn't have water. So I guess she asked Rick, why were you putting feces on yourself? And his answer was, or maybe because, why were you drinking water out of the toilet? Because I was afraid I wouldn't have water. Later on, I think there's another motive for him putting feces on himself. Diener, Rick was engaging in conversations with you. Yes, he indicated topics on his own, whatever, on his own. She wasn't really prompting him. Diener said observations of his state, and Diener said Rick had difficulty staying on topic, did not present as psychotic, although later on I thought she said he did show psychotic symptoms at some point. Page 193 of 209. The only thing I have for Diener's question was notes. Wallace said he will and will not kill himself. So he said, I will kill myself. Also, I will not kill myself. Inconsistent presentation by Rick. He had a tablet for communication with his wife. Diener said his behavior improved. He does not present as psychotic. Diener says, I'm sorry, Wallace said something like our diagnosis, he's in remission, basically. I believe that Diener asked for a definition of psychotic, and Wallace said it lasts for about a month, and then the patient returns to normal. Again, Diener asked about expectations, and Wallace said, eat meals, take care of yourself, stay active, and not lay in bed all the time. So those were the suggestions from Walla for Rick to get better. Diener, do those things assist him? And she said, yes, in the beginning they did. Did you have conversations with mental health professionals about helping Richard Allen? And no, that's not true. I'm sorry. Diener said, did your conversations with Richard Allen and Richard Allen talking to other mental health professionals help Richard Allen's mental health? And Wallace said, I'd like to think so. Diener, you said he would and would not kill himself. Walla said at this point he was already on constant observation, which is a guard is outside his cell all the time. Diener brought up Rick's tablet, and Walla said yes, he was provided one. Diener said faster than normal. Walla said yes. Diener, why didn't he have a tablet? And Walla said Rick broke it, although it's never been confirmed why or when he broke it. I'm not sure if we're going to see video from his cell and which day or what prompted it. Diener, the warden, was going to provide a TV to Rick, and Walla said Rick did not want a TV that he was offered. I guess Diener said on this day of the confessions, was he cooperative to participate in the session? Walla said for the most part. Diener brought up an addendum from May 3rd, where there's some kind of reference to diagnosis, explanation of the diagnostic criteria. Walla's response was brief psychotic disorder, one or more symptoms. We were seeing disorganized speech and behavior. Diener said, but there's no delusions or hallucinations, and Walla said no. I missed Diener's next question, but Walla's answer was 1 day, less than 1 month, which seems to be like the timeline for somebody to be undergoing a brief psychotic disorder, like being psychotic, is anywhere between 1 day to less than 1 month. Diener then asked about what kind of stressors would put somebody into that brief reactive psychosis, and I could not hear Walla's answer. Diener, something about a diagnosis indicates at least 1 day, less than 1 month. Walla said, I took it from the beginning of April to the beginning of May. So I guess Rick started acting a little crazy in early April until early May. Here we go. This is the thing that we've been waiting for. Although I thought at first it was like the April 5th thing, but maybe that was to the guards. So this says May 3rd, 2023. What did you learn in your meeting with Richard Allen? Walla said he wanted to call his wife. I believe I wrote down an attempt to confess. He provided a narrative of the crime. He said, I want to confess. He said that morning he saw his parents and they wanted to go eat, and he opted to get a 6-pack of beer and drank 3 beers. I guess he went home, bundled up, and then he saw the girls on the trail. He followed the girls to the bridge, and then he said he did something with his gun that made the bullet fall out at that point. His goal was to rape them, and he thought they were older. This is not exact quotes. This is me trying to write as much as possible as she's going through this entire thing. So there's some confusion about this. There's always been this rumor that Rick saw a white van going down the private drive to the Weber's house at the end. Apparently, some people in the media section today, when Walla was saying this, I wrote down, saw a van not follow through with the rape intention. Some people thought Rick saw a man, but it seems to be like a van, which we'll get to that later with Brad Weber's testimony. So Rick saw van or man not follow through with rape, cut their necks, and made sure the girls were dead, covered with tree branches. He did not exit the trail. Something went to his vehicle by a building, continued living life as time went on. That was the end of this major Dr. Walla reveal. So Diener said, did you ask him about the crime? And Walla said, no, I did not ask him. He just started talking about it. Diener, did you ask about... did you ask about Rick's prior confessions to the warden and the companions to elicit a statement from Rick? And Walla said, no, I did not bring it up. I missed the next question and answer. Diener said, did you prompt him to start talking about that? And Walla said, no. Diener said, how did Richard Allen appear? What was his demeanor? How was he emotionally after telling you this story? Walla said he appeared relieved, concerned about his property in his cell, his food and water. He requested a transfer to another facility. She then referenced feces because he was afraid of telling the truth. I'm not sure what that's about. And there's one other comment that I did not hear. I wrote down concerns from Diener, but I could not hear the question or answer. What do we got here? Something asked for property back. What didn't he have? Like I said before, when someone's on suicide watch, some of their possessions are taken from their cell in case they could harm themselves. So I'm not sure what that's totally about. Diener said there's a note on this form under clinical observations. And Wallace said some odd ODD things happened. Rick repeated he did not want to miss Easter. What was that? Let me ask. After this, we were asking, when was Easter? Siri, on what date was Easter in 2023? It was on April 9th. So why on May 3rd is he saying he doesn't want to miss Easter? I don't know. Moving along. Diener, what information provided was organized? No, sorry. Was the information that Rick provided in this confession organized? And Wallace said it was. Was Rick showing any psychotic symptoms on May 3rd when he said this? No. Diener said something about impulse control have any impact on a statement he gave to you, and Wallace said no. I missed the next question and answer. I missed the next question, I believe, but the answer was he was more organized since he was placed on suicide watch. Diener said, what was your assessment? Wallace said he probably had a medication change. Diener said, would you allow him to have property in his cell? And Wallace said he had his regular stuff. Diener said something like about the clothing you would keep away because it was a risk for him to self-harm. And she said, yes, we had to take away some of his clothing. That's why he would wear this, what they call the kimono or a smock, or Fred Flintstone dress. They didn't say dress, I said dress. Diener said the next document is dated 2 days later on May 5th. Page 195 of 209. Diener said, did you do an evaluation of suicide risk? Wallace said, usually when somebody changes from close to constant observation. There was some reference by Diener to some adjustment, and Wallace said, I'm not sure. Diener talked about an action plan. Wallace said a treatment plan is a review that they do of the patient every 6 months. Diener said, what is your number one goal in dealing with Richard Allen? And there's a motorcycle going by. And Walla said, to ensure his safety. Diener said, then after that, is it to ensure his mental health? Walla said, yes, we wanted to target his depression and anxiety. Diener said, was there a change in the level of suicide watch? And then, I guess this is early May. And Walla said, yes, from constant to close observation, which is then every 15 minutes. It indicated some kind of improvement in Richard Allen's mental health. The next document is dated May 9th. Diener said, did Rick talk about the case? And I guess Walla said, Rick said, I just want to sign my confession. Walla said, I told him to talk to his attorneys. Moving along, Diener said, what was his mental state? How would he keep himself occupied? Wallace talked about Rick having thoughts of self-harm, planning his last meal. He said he wanted to help others and get a job at the prison. Also, he said he'd be better off dead. Diener said something about an assessment section on the paper and psychotic symptoms. Wallace's answer was no. The next thing was something about cognitively. Wallace's response was mild impaired judgment, some preoccupations. So I guess these are on this form, various things that they can check off to quickly determine somebody's mental health status. Diener talked about an assessment and a complaint or compliant with medication. Wallace said, I never tracked medication because sometimes it's hard to know. It's a different record I did not normally access. So on May 10th, here comes some more stuff. Walla said there were issues with Richard Allen's use of a phone. because his tablet was broken. So Walla said, I was able to get a phone approved by the warden to make the phone call with him. We were able to connect with his wife. So this is May 10th. Diener said, did you leave the room? Walla said, I did, but when I came back, here's what she had to say. So this is Dr. Walla. He wanted to call her back, his wife, to tell her he did it. Rick said, I want you to hear, Rick said, I want you to hear to understand. He called, I wrote, he called, ask whether wife and family loved him and will continue to do so. See one more time. And then he talked about the electric chair. Then he said, I killed Abby and Libby. His wife would say stuff like, stop saying that. Rick said, she doesn't believe me. So he said, my wife doesn't believe me, my confessions. Rick then said, I did not do everything I said, but I did kill Abby and Libby. Page 196 of 209. So that was the end of that May 10th statement, confession, whatever you want to call it. So page 196 of 209. Diener asked about Rick's demeanor. I think she said when he talked to his wife, he was talking very pleasant, affectionate. After that, he seemed okay. Calm. He did not cry. No evidence of psychosis on May 10th. The next report is May 11th, the following day. Again, Diener said statements how he was feeling about the crimes. I wrote that Dr. Walla said, mentioned closure, apologized to families. I wrote, see his wife, forgive himself, doesn't know what closure is for himself. There was either another question and answer that I totally missed. So next up was a few months later, 3 months later, August 3rd, 2023, Rick said the following things. I want to go to heaven. He asked if he contacted his wife, if we could contact his wife. I wrote down, I can't, but wanted to and see his family. Afraid of dying. Rick also said, I don't feel well. I feel like my heart will quit. Rick said, part of me thinks I want to die. He was confused. I don't know if I'm going to heaven. So Diener then said, why couldn't he contact his family? Wallace said, I don't know, maybe he had no tablet at that time, or he did not want to. Diener said, did Rick ever say anything about his family want him to contact him? I'm not sure what that is. Oh, well, then I think Rick said, I need to let my wife go. He felt like he was a burden to her. So then we took a break at 10:50 in the morning, and we came back and Exhibit 304, and Diener said, do you remember or recall Richard Allen's physical appearance in November 2022? Wallace said he was around 180 pounds when he arrived at Westville. Diener then talked about Rick refusing meals. Was that a concern to Dr. Walla? And she said yes. Diener said, would you check in with him about reducing meals? Would you check in with Rick about him not eating as much of his meals? Wallace said Rick exercised and he tried to lose weight. He would only refuse 3 meals in a row, not 4, or else we would have to report. So apparently there's a policy in Westville that if an inmate skips 4 meals in a row, whoever's giving them the meal has to report it to whatever authorities, administration. I'm not sure if there's some kind of punishment or like they restrict their privileges. So Wallace said he was careful not to miss the 4th meal. So Rick was aware there might be some consequences if he skipped 4 meals in a row. So he would only skip 3 in a row. Diener said, was there satisfaction with Rick's weight loss? And she said yes, which I guess it means Rick was satisfied he was losing weight. Would Rick exercise in his cell? Yes. On November 14th, 2022, there's a report. Her purpose for mental health visits with Rick. Wallace said, time he refused to see me. There was a time that he refused to see me. He felt like he was a burden to Dr. Walla. I encouraged him to visit with me. Something about who communicate with. He said, at that time, Rick said, I do not have a public defender. Oh, so who communicate with? I guess Dr. Walla said, do not discuss your case with other inmates or the guards. And Rick said, she probably said only your attorneys. And that's when Rick said, I do not even have a public defender at this point. I guess November 10th. I may have said November 14th. It looks like November 10th, 2022. The last thing I wrote for Walla said, appropriate to accept help for mental health issues. Next, Diener brought up April 7th, 2023. After Rick's first confession, then I wrote in session, reference he was aware he had confessed. So I guess a few days before April 7th, Rick made confessions, maybe to the warden and some suicide companions. So Diener is saying in the session after that, did Rick reference that he was aware that he had previously confessed a few days earlier? Walla said, I told him he had confessed. Page 197 of 209. Walla continued, I said not in his best interest and that he should only talk to his attorney. So she said, shut your mouth, stop confessing to guards and the warden. That was my summary. Diener said something I wrote down that day. So Walla replied, he was being more blatant in faking his symptoms and his memory loss. Diener talked about symptoms you were referencing in your report. Walla said, he said I didn't sign anything, right? So I guess he's talking about like when he confessed, he said, so when she's talking about like, you confessed a few days ago, Rick may have said, I didn't sign anything, right? Claims of memory loss. So I think at that point, Dr. Walla thought he was faking his memory loss. April 10th, Walla met outside of Rick's cell. So sometimes she would go up to a cell and ask him questions. Sometimes he was taken out and brought to this, what she refers to as a cubicle, but Rosie on the defense refers to as a cage, which I think is 3 feet by 3 feet with some kind of gate. We'll get to that soon. So April 10th, met outside his cell. Some odd behavior. This is Walla's reply. Some odd behaviors. Rick was against the wall. I think she said raising his arms up and then down. He was naked. There were papers on his cell floor, like legal papers. He may have urinated outside the toilet. I'm not going to say that word that I wrote down, but something about his Mr. Pee-Pee, his genital, or whatever you want to call it, his genitals. He was touching it or doing something. I'm glad I could not hear it. So Diener then said, what papers were on his floor? Walla said, I assumed it was his discovery, which he had gotten a few days earlier. I missed Diener's next question. Walla's answer was, all I know is they were concerned other incarcerated inmates would see discovery. So at some point, Rick had suicide companions, which were actual other inmates and not the guards. So there's this deal like in prison where I guess sometimes inmates will find out like information about somebody's case and maybe go to the warden and say, this inmate confessed to me this information, but it's not true. And the inmate that's lying got that information because they're looking at this legal paper in this other inmate's cell. So the warden was like, I don't want these other inmates to see Rick's discovery that's on the floor. So I'm switching these inmates with officer companions. Diener said, when did Rick receive these legal papers, the discovery? Walla's answer was all before all this stuff went down. Dr. Walla is like 30 years old, in case you're wondering. Moving along. Did you know that Dr. Walla, this is coming up later, I'll describe it later. On April 5th, was Rick confessing? Walla said he received discovery around the time he started confessing. So Rick received like the police reports and other stuff in the investigation, and then he started confessing. So did he see something in those papers that he said, there's something here that I cannot explain away. I'm going to be found guilty. I might as well start confessing. Remains to be seen. Diener, did you observe Richard Allen have a shift in behavior after he received discovery? And Walla said, yes, I did notice a shift in behavior. On April 12th, you saw Richard Allen outside of his cell. The answer was yes. What did you observe? Rick was clapping, banging, kicking the door, masturbating, constantly naked, rolling around, touching his genitals. I wrote previous time, refused to leave. Oh, before that, in an instance before this day, Rick refused to leave the rec area, the recreation area, for over an hour. So there's some issues with the guards trying to get him out of that area. Diener asked another question. Walla's answer was he was doing it in order to get something in return. So Walla thought Rick was faking this behavior to get something in return. You might be asking, what would he get in return? It seems like he may have known that if he acted crazy, he might be able to do in Logansport, which may have been closer to his family, and they may have been able to have more family visits in person. I don't know. Coming up, April 13th, 2023, some more stuff. Yeah, there's even more like confessions coming up. Hello, that's not even true. April 13th, 2023. All I wrote down, I don't know if this is Diener or Walla. I think it was Walla. Informed behavior escalating, laying in and consuming feces. Looked into, this is Dr. Walla. So we looked into involuntary medication. A psychiatrist tried to offer Rick medications. They determined he did not qualify for emergent involuntary injection. Diener said you changed his observation from close, which is 15 minutes, to constant, which is every minute. I guess this is Dr. Walla continued. Noted emotional breakdown linked to discovery, exaggerating, little to no sleep since April 4th. The last few weeks, he really did not sleep a lot. Were you concerned? Walla said possible, but almost doesn't matter because he was deteriorating and something needed to be done about it. So whatever the cause of his behavior, she was saying, whatever the cause, we needed to do something to try and fix him and get him better. Page 198 of 209. Diener said something about, what was your decision to do voluntary, I guess she said you made a decision to do voluntary injection of medication. Walla said correct. Here comes April 17th, 2023. Walla's descriptions of a few different things going on. Greasy, dirty window in his cell, eyes closed as he was standing in the middle of his cell. She said he was wearing clothes. He was mouthing words like he was praying, asking to talk, agreed to exit cell. Diener said, was there anything notable about that? Walla said he was acting bizarrely, and then he kind of just stops acting bizarrely, and he starts acting normal. Diener said, do you have other inmates who suffer from psychosis? Walla said, yes, I can diagnose when somebody is undergoing a psychosis. Diener, would a person suffer psychosis if their behavior if their behavior was like above, maybe? Walla said, not completely impossible, would need more information. Diener said, what happened next? Walla said, Rick's eyes closed majority of session. She said, one other thing I could not hear. She continued that Rick said he was having nightmares, possibly describing his experiences from the past 2 weeks. There was some kind of reference to more people dying. He just wanted to tell the truth. He was separated from reality at some point, go back and make things right. So I guess Rick said he wanted to go back and make things right. Whether you think that's about the murders or not, that's up to you. So Diener said, what happened next? Rick said he wished he had a medical issue to explain what he does. I'm not sure about that total quote, so don't quote me on it. The next thing also, I did not catch all of it. I wrote down, did some things, ... Rick said, that's not who I am. I missed the next sentence. After that, Rick said he activated nuclear war after my death. Rick would start his statements being rational, then trailing off and irrational. Diener said, so Rick was sharing unconnected ideas. Walla said yes. Diener said something about the same day. Walla said after he received, I guess, his legal paperwork on April 4th, there was some kind of, I don't know if it was April 4th or 14th. It may be, I think it was the 14th actually. Involuntary medications, some improvement, better sleep, no hallucinations, but he had signs of paranoia. Moving along to April 21st, Diener said any bizarre behavior. And was it genuine or beyond his control? Walla just said something like, I didn't something, so I did not hear. April 25th, he reported struggling due to not taking Prozac. He mentioned Seroquel, which is like some kind of mental health medication, which I don't know why they're just talking about what medications Rick was on. I don't know if that's like a HIPAA violation. I don't know. Because they were just like totally saying the medications that he was taking. So again, that last line, he reported struggling due to not taking Prozac, something about Rick mentioned Seroquel, wanted in-person visitation with his wife and a transfer to a different facility. Page 199 of 209. Diener said, is this doing something for himself? And Walla's answer was something like visits with his wife and transfer. So it seems like Walla is saying maybe Rick was faking to get transferred to a better facility out of segregation at Westville, and also to get more visits with his wife in person. Diener, something about special accommodations for Richard Allen to visit his wife. So did Westville make special accommodations? Wallace said yes. One visit happened and then maybe a second. So normally in the segregated area, I guess they don't have a visitation area for men to see their families, but I don't know. I don't think that's right. For Rick was not convicted. Why can't they just take him to a normal visitation room, even in general public area or general population? Sorry. Moving along, April 28th, 2023, Walla described Rick in his cell, lying on bed naked. He looked at me, said he had to shower before meeting with me. Something about the session. She said, there is no time for you to take a shower before the session. There was a smell coming from his cell. Walla said, I took it as positive that he was aware of the conditions and that he probably, this is my thing, reeked and needed to take a shower before he got close to her. Diener, something about did you talk about advocating for Rick to get another visit with his wife? Walla said, I identified that it would be important and motivating for Rick to take care of himself, so the warden would approve, I guess, these in-person visits with Rick's wife. I did not hear Diener's question, but Walla's response was, he said he was unselfish. Diener, was Rick refusing water? I did not totally hear this part, but I wrote down, if he had a flood in his cell with water, it will maybe Rick turned on the sink in his cell and it would cause a problem, and then the prison would turn off the water connection in his cell. I'm not sure. That was kind of unclear. Diener, he would not be deprived of food or water as a punishment, though. And Wall said, no, that's not a punishment. I did not hear the next question, but Wallace said, didn't see him as psychotic. I did not see him as psychotic. Finally, she's done, and here comes Rosie. Rosie says, you talked about your education and your degree from a professional psychology school? She said yes. Rosie said, you mostly worked in prison systems. She said, yes. He said, you're not working with the Department of Corrections anymore. She said, I'm not. He said, didn't you go back to work? And she said, for one last day after the July hearing. So as I mentioned before, she testified July 30th or 31st, and it was revealed that she accessed Kegan Klein's records in the prison system. But since she was not actually like taking care of Kegan, that was a no-no, and she got kind of fired. Or not kind of, definitely. So Rosie said, you were familiar on a personal level with the circumstances of this case, other than your treatment of Richard Allen. You were following this case before you treated Richard Allen, and she said yes. Rosie, your interest in this case grew as the investigation grew. She said yes. Something in this case, not involving Richard Allen, caught your interest and you decided to access, and then there was an objection from Diener, who asked to approach the bench. They came back, and Rosie's question was, there were developments before Richard Allen in this case, and you used the database for your personal use. And Walla said, yes. Rosie said, why are you not employed? Walla said something like they had to do an investigation. Just like I said before, she should not have accessed Kegan's record, and so she lost her job for it. Here we go. Rosie said, you followed several podcasts about the case. He referenced True Crime, Gray Hughes, Defense Diaries, Criminality, Prosecutors, and also online chat rooms. And Walla said yes. Dina said, are we still on? We're still live. At one point, you posted your recommendations online, and she said, I did. So those are her recommendations. People check out. Moving along, this is Rosie. So he said, this happened earlier this year. You posted that online on Facebook. And she said, I think so. Which I think was maybe 2023, but who cares? Diener said, or Rosie, I'm sorry. That act was a violation of the APA guidelines, and Walla said it's a gray area in the guidelines about, I guess, posting online or following cases that you're giving services for. Page 200 of 209. Rosie, after Rick was arrested, your interest is even greater in the case, and she said yes. Rosie said you used to commute, and during your time on your commute to work from your home, you would listen to content about the case, and she said yes. There goes another motorcycle. Rosie, somebody on the internet pointed out that you were following the case, and Walla said yes. So obviously people searched her name once it came out in a legal document. They saw she was on Facebook. They found at least one of her posts in one of the Delphi online Facebook groups where she recommended these like 7 content creators. Rosie, you consumed a lot of information on the case, and Walla said yes. Rosie, you never disclosed to an employee that you had personal interest in the case. Walla said, we discussed it when Rick came to our facility. Rosie, on June 6, 2024, we deposed you. Something about a report to your employer about following the case. Walla said, no, I didn't do anything formal. When he was coming to Westville, I had conversations with both of my supervisors. Rosie said something like, you said no at the time, now you're, and that got cut off. Rosie said, if you had a chance to do it over again, would you stop doing this stuff when treating Richard Allen? Walla said, probably. Rosie said, you shared your thoughts with Rick Allen. She said, yes. Rosie referenced their deposition and said, were you communicating to Richard Allen about you following this case while you were treating him? And she said, yes. Rosie said, Rick arrived and he had depression and anxiety when he got to Westville. Walla said, yes. Are inmates, hold on. Yeah, so Rosie said, are inmates assessed at this RDC, Reception Diagnostic Center, and then sent to the facility where they're going to spend the time for their sentence? Walla said yes. Rosie said, you reviewed Rick's RDC assessment. From the minute you review records, you are creating your own assessment about this, whatever patient you're dealing with. I did not hear her answer or his next question or her answer. Rosie said, there was no clinical testing as part of Richard Allen's intake, and she said, no. Could you have done a mental examination, but it was not done? And she said, her answer was no. So I'm not sure exactly what part of that question she was replying to. Department of Corrections does not have the resources to do this clinical testing, and she said, no, they do not, and that's the reason why she did not do it. Rosie, Rick was diagnosed with major depressive disorder, and she said, yes, even before he was arrested. Rosie said, but that may not have been added to your system, and she said, correct. Rick also had anxiety disorder. Yes. Rosie said he attended outpatient facility prior to Department of Corrections. She said yes. Rick also had dependent personality syndrome. She said it was possible. Walla said it was possible. Later, he demonstrated some characteristics specifically in relation to his wife. So he's like dependent on her. Rosie, was Rick fragile mentally when he arrived at Department of Corrections? Yes. When you saw him at his cell, would you agree his circumstances in November 2022 generally remained unchanged for the next 13 months? Correct. Was there some kind of discussion about lights in Rick's cell? She said there was. Yes, okay. It was lights. I was not sure if I wrote the right word. Page 201 of 209. Rosie, so you agree that the lights were detrimental? Walla said, I think he had the ability to dim them. Rosie said, Rick had a camera pointed on him 24 hours a day. Yes. No privacy. Right. You never requested to view video of Rick in a cell? She said, one time I was in the control room, but then I did not hear the rest. Rosie said, at your deposition, you told me you had never seen video. She said, I may have. Then Rosie said something like, about something. Then he said, or do you want me to move on? And she said, move on to the next topic. So he did. Rosie, there is no cell in that facility, Westville, that is more secure and restricted in that prison than the one that Richard Allen was in. She said, yes, that's correct. Rosie, a cell was available in the infirmary. She said it was a level 2, and mostly those are for medical issues, not mental health. Rosie said, are inmates classified with mental health codes? Yes. Did Rick have the code D? Yes. There's 5 codes, right? She said, yes. She said 6. A, B, C, D, E, F. Then they talked about the least severe is A. And essentially Rick was a 4 out of 5 because she said 5 was more drug related. Actually, I think number F was more drug related, she said. Rosie said something about the policy, and Walla's answer was 1 time a week at a cell, 1 time a month out of cell. That may have been her general interaction with Rick when he first got there. Rosie asked a question that I did not hear. She said, all suicide watch inmates sessions are daily visits with me and other mental health professionals. It was time for lunch, and then afterwards, Rosie continued. So he said, earlier on, you mentioned the word discovery. Richard Allen received his discovery at Westville. She said, I think so. Rosie talked about log sheets and a report and said Rick saw a discovery, which essentially was information from the investigation into this crime. Wallace said yes. And again, Rosie's trying to convey to the jury what this word discovery means. And so he said, is that discovery? She said yes. So it's just like legal papers from the investigation. Rosie, Rick received a large portion of discovery at one point. Walla said, that's my understanding. Rosie said, Rick's mental health at November 2022 intake, you knew that he had major depressive disorder. Walla said, I believe so. Rosie referenced an intake document from November 18th, 2022 that also referenced major depressive disorder. Walla said yes. Rick's detention and Rosie in Westville. Wallace said, I agree. Rosie said Rick had no convicted of a crime. So Wallace said that's not a common thing. Had a few safekeeper inmates in the past. Rosie talked about an orientation process for offenders who arrive at Westville, and Wallace said, yes, there is some kind of orientation. Rosie talked about it teaching about politics in prison. At this point, Diener interrupted and said, ever attended one of these orientations? She said no. So Diener objected and it was sustained. Page 202 of 209, did Richard Allen get an orientation? And Wallace said no. Rosie said there's a lot of rules in prisons about showers, your tablet, recreation time, food, and commissary, and Walla agreed. Yes, there are a lot of rules. Tom wrote, what does this have to do with Rick being innocent or not guilty? Moving along. Rosie said there's various stressors that could, whatever, upset a inmate with mental health. Rosie said, you mentioned getting Rick a TV. She said yes. But then Rosie said, but a suicide watch inmate, their cell is stripped. And Wall said yes. Rosie, did you limit Rick's recreation opportunities? Wall said if somebody is a danger to themselves, they would get less recreation time. Rosie, did Rick go from regular clothes to a kimono? Could that be a stressor for an inmate? And Wallace said, so Rosie said, Rick had to deal with all of this. Wallace said he did. Rosie, when he was out of his cell for sessions, you would take Rick, or the guards would take Rick from his cell to this cubicle. Wallace said yes. But then Rosie said Rick was also confined, and there's like a gate in this cubicle that he called it, Rosie calls a cage. Walla agreed Rick was confined, and then there was a gate. Rosie said, did you talk through that gate to Rick? And she said yes. Rosie said, was it like 3 feet by 3 feet? And she said maybe. Rosie, would you agree that is not a therapeutic session or setting? Wallace said, that's all we have. Rosie said, but that's not normal practice. In your normal practice, it's more of a comfortable setting. And she said, yes. Obviously not a 3 by 3 cage. Rosie, was Rick shackled? Wallace said, I think they unshackle him once he was in the cage. Rosie said, in your deposition, you said he was always shackled. She said, yes, but I don't remember it. I don't remember it that way. I'm not sure why I described it to you in my deposition that he's always shackled, but she says, from what I remember, once he was in this whatever cubicle, they would remove his shackles. Rosie said, did you see video of Rick being transported to hearings? She said, no, I never witnessed it. He said, but on TV, did you ever see the number of people who have to, like the sheriffs and police, that transport Richard Allen? She said, yes, I've seen it on TV. Then Rosie was talking more about this transportation to court. He said, Dr. Walla, you said that Rick was worried about getting in the dog cage. She said, right. So I think maybe Rick referred to the dog cage as in this police van to go to the hearings. Rosie talked about a suicide monitor sheet. Coming to get you. Delphi dummies, that's a good clip for you. Continuing on, Rosie said, self-monitor, or sorry, not self-monitor, suicide monitor sheet from November 4th, 2022. Rick was frustrated with inmate companions, and she said yes, but November 4th, 2022, I don't even know that that was like his first day at Westville. I missed the next thing. The next question from Rosie. You report he denied having suicidal ideations. Ideations? I'm not sure how to pronounce that word, sorry. Walla said he reported he did not, and then somebody asked for a sidebar. Rosie then said Rick was struggling with something, and Walla said, yes, I did not hear what that something was. Rosie, did you report he complained having trouble adjusting to blank? He did, was the answer. On November 7th, 2022, there was a suicide report. Rick said he had a history of sexual abuse, but he has none. And Wallace said that's what Rick, reported. Page 203 of 209, we're getting closer to the end of this, and then Steve Mullen, and then Brad Weber. Rosie, other times Rick talked about being sexually abused. You reported it on the sheet. I do not have an answer for Walla. Rosie continued talking about Rick's major depressive disorder and that he was institutionalized in 2019. She said, yes, the month was not revealed. Rosie said something about Rick said he was hearing things he was not used to hearing. Wallace said yes. But then Rosie continued, things like inmate noises and noises in the cell or in the prison. And Wallace said yes. I think Rosie said something like Rick was already stressed about when he would get out of prison. And Wallace said yes. On November 9th, 2022, did Rick complain about what people say to him in prison? Wallace said yes, the other inmates are taunting him, calling him baby killer, and saying, we're going to kill you. Rosie said on November 10th, 2022, Rick thought this was a psychological game meant to tear him down. Wallace said yes. On November 21st, 2022, did Rick communicate that he was being treated as if he was already found guilty? Wallace said yes. Rosie, did Rick say he was innocent on November 21st, 2022? Yes. I missed the next question and answer. I missed the next question, but Wallace's answer was, describe trip back to Delphi, strange and scary. Yes, that's what Wallace said. Rick did say that. Did Rick also say, it's good to know the evidence did not point to him? Wallace said, yes, he did say that. I wrote, he consistently presents as blank. I did not hear it. The answer was yes, from Walla. On December 6, 2022, did Rick say he was innocent and felt like he was already convicted? A sidebar was requested and was sustained. Some reference from Rosie about a restricted housing documentation or document in 2022. Something about Rick's other frustrations. Wallace said yes, he could not get a regular toothbrush. Visits with his wife. Something about a TV and desk. He could not charge his tablet in his cell. Treated worse than convicted offenders. So he felt like he was being treated worse than convicted offenders. Rosie said, did Rick complain about conditions in his cell? There was an objection about hearsay. It was sustained. Rosie said that Rick can't receive a letter from his wife. He also complained about heartburn and something about his clothing. At this point, Judge Gull was the one who asked for a sidebar. Rosie said, was there concerns about Rick's pants? Wallace said yes. I don't know what that was all about, because then the next sentence, Rosie said, they're building a new prison for Westville, and Wallace said yes. There was an objection, and it was overruled for the prosecution. Next up, Rosie talked about a suicide log from April 4th, 2023. Something about observing clinical risk behaviors. Wallace said yes, suicidal, self-harm, She said one other thing. After that, she said, death bring relief. So I guess that's a quote from Rick. Insomnia. Then I wrote lots more. I was not able to write down all these clinical risk factors that she observed for Rick on April 4th, 2023, around the time he was confessing. April 13th, Rosie, did you discover Rick had a grave disability? Walla said yes. Page 204 of 209. Rosie, did you prompt the discussion of voluntary medication? Walla said yes. On April 20th, 2023, did you report Rick's cognitive issues had worsened? Walla said yes. On May 11th, 2023, did you say Rick had a preoccupation that he was something? I didn't hear that last word or her answer. The next thing I wrote was report he received 2 injections. Walla said yes. Rosie said, what is an injection? Walla said involuntary medication. The word that Rosie brought up next was Haldol, Haldol. Walla said yes. The next thing for Rosie, I just wrote last 1 month. Yes. So I think this is the brief psychotic break or something. As Walla said before, it would last between 1 day and less than 1 month. So Rosie said last 1 month, and Walla said yes. Rosie said, did it extend into June? And Walla said, I don't know. Rosie said, could there be a series of them? Walla said yes, but I didn't think they were very long. Rosie talked about May 16th. Did you observe Richard Allen with 2 black eyes? Yes. Was it due to self-harm? Yes. Rosie said, so Haldol was not working. I did not hear Walla's answer. Rosie said, you testified you had nothing to do with Rick's medication. She said no, but I do know what the regimen is. Rosie talked about June 5th, 2023. Rick received another involuntary injection due to headbanging, self-harm. Walla said yes. But this does not fall under the other shot of Haldol, I think. Rosie talked about July 26, 2023. Physical characteristics about Rick that you noticed. So July 26, 2023, Walla observed Rick's bulging eyes. I reported it. Next up, Rosie talked about, did you consider that a product of depression, of Rick's depression? I did not hear Walla's answer. Rosie said about August 16th, 2023, there was a change in physical characteristics. Walla said Rick's eyes no longer protruded. Rosie talked about November 8th, 2022, an intake document when Rick got to Westville. His height was 5'5", and his weight was 173. At least that's what I heard. I might be wrong. Rosie then said Rick met with an attorney, then his behavior changed. You never saw that discovery of Rick's, did you? And she said no. Rosie said, did you know our meetings with Rick were being videotaped? She said yes. Did you watch them? No. Did you meet Rick at his cell door or his cage? She said yes. So Rosie said, were you doing like rounds at this time? So that's when somebody in a prison or whatever would walk around and check in on the various inmates. So I wrote, Rosie said, you do rounds. She said, not everyone. I guess she would not look at everyone. She'd only look at certain inmates. So Dr. Martin, I guess, is this guy who is a psychiatrist who prescribes medication, since Walla is a psychologist and cannot prescribe medication. So his name is Dr. Martin. Rosie said Dr. Martin came from prison, another prison, to Westville to help with a backlog of inmate medication. Walla said yes. There was some kind of reference from Rosie about 40 to 50 inmates a day. And Walla said, when I am doing the rounds, like walking around the prison. Rosie said, you destroyed your original notes from your sessions with Rick, and she said yes. I wrote down that I wanted to fall asleep at this point, so I started taking less notes, but I actually kept going. Page 205 of 209, I'm almost done. Rosie said something about Westville and the APA, which I think is something like, I don't even know, something along the lines of American Psychology Association, something like that, like some kind of association that Dr. Walla would be a part of. So Rosie said Westville/APA policy. What is it about destroyed patient notes? Like, should she be shredding them or keeping them? There was no, I did not hear Wallace answer. So Rosie moved on saying, did Rick move in and out of depression? Wallace said, yes. Did Rick have a serious mental illness? What is the formal definition in the policy? No, that was not, I apologize. Not Rick. I think Rosie said at this point, serious mental illness. What is the formal definition of that? Maybe in the Westville policy or maybe APA. I only wrote yes for Walla. Rosie said, did Rick fit that definition of serious mental illness? And Walla said yes. Rosie, so I think he uses SMI for serious mental illness. Rosie's, I think his point of this next comment and question was, are you not supposed to have somebody with a serious mental illness for more than 30 days in solitary confinement? And Wallace said, yes, that's correct. You're not supposed to. Rosie, is it detrimental to their mental health? Correct, said Walla. And Rosie said, Rick was confined in Westville for 13 months. And Wallace said, yes. Rosie, you would never use solitary confinement to treat a client with mental health issues. And she said, no. Rosie said Rick had no diagnosis of psychotic processes between April and June. Wallace said, I believe it started in April. Then Rosie talked about Rick having an abrupt onset of psychosis in March to June. Wallace said, I believe it was late March. At this point, he said, Diener asked you about Rick faking his symptoms and his crazy behavior. Rosie said, in some reports, you questioned Rick's authenticity. And she said, yes, I did. Rosie talked about Walla's deposition and said, so Walla had a deposition after her reports on Rick's faking or not. And so Rosie brought up and saying, in your deposition after that, you said now, looking back, you are questioning whether or not Rick truly was being truthful or crazy and not faking. And Walla said, yes, I later wondered if he truly was being real. So Diener said, this is her turn to ask Walla some more questions. You were working for two separate providers, and Walla referenced Dr. Martin would prescribe medication and Dr. Walla would provide therapeutic services. Or sorry, not she was working for, Rick was getting mental health assistance from two separate providers. Dr. Martin would give medication, Walla would give therapeutic services. Diener then talked about best practices for the APA. What procedure would you follow? Wallace said something about a sheet of paper. I guess she would write her notes on a sheet of paper, go back to her office and enter the information into her computer and then shred it, the original paper. Diener talked about the rounds and the sessions, and Wallace said generally she would do the sessions and not the rounds. She also talked about confidential sessions. How long were they? Walla would say she would meet with Rick between 15 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour, but there was no limit on the time. Diener said, do you believe you entered your information from these sheets into the computer system incorrectly? Wallace said, no, I don't think I did it incorrectly. Diener, would you shred your notes after? Yes. Diener, is your procedure different from the APA? And she said, yes. Do you take your responsibility seriously to accurately document your conversations with Richard Allen? Yes. Diener talked about a conversation in November 2022 when Rick became an inmate at Westville. Since Walla was familiar with the Delphi case and a true crime fan, Walla said, yes, I spoke to my 2 supervisors who are doctors. I may have known he was arriving on suicide watch. They were aware I followed true crime and Delphi. There's some kind of objection and it was sustained. Diener said, were you concerned aware of the case? And Wallace said, no. Did you make them aware that you followed this Delphi case? Yes. But were you able to separate your interest in the case and your treatment of Richard Allen? And Wallace said, yes. Page 206 of 209. There's a lot of jury questions coming up. Diener said, you shared information from online and gave it to Richard Allen about the case. Not the case, but I'm about to say what Wallace said. Wallace said, I told him he had supporters so he could maintain hope for his future. She was not talking about case facts. I just want to be clear about that. Diener said something about the stressors and impacting Rick's behavior. Are those the kind of things the entire time? Wallace said more common when he first got there around November to January. Diener then said, so things calmed down by March. I believe Wallace said yes, but I'm not certain. Diener then talked about the April change when Rick got discovery. Were there any other changes that could have contributed to Richard Allen's sudden mental health change and also start confessing? Wallace said, not that I know of. Diener, things provided like patient had sexual abuse or alcohol history. I'm not sure what that comment was about. I don't have an answer also. Diener said something about confession about crime. I did not hear something, and then something about a sex addict. I'm sorry, I missed some of this stuff here. Diener, do people underreport when they have unfavorable admissions? Wallace said they do. So I guess maybe what I was referring to the last few comments, maybe Diener was saying, if Rick was a sex addict and that caused him to do this crime, is it typical for an inmate to say, I did this crime because I'm a sex addict? Or do inmates underreport when they don't want people to know they're a sex addict? So Diener was done, and here comes Rosie. Do you know if Rick Allen was underreporting his history of sexual abuse and alcoholism? Wallace said, I don't. Rosie said, maybe he was telling you things that were not true. Wallace did not have an answer that I heard, at least. So then Rosie moved on to, so you're saying you are able to separate personal interests in like true crime and your professional interests? And Wallace said, yes. But then Rosie said, well, you searched the database. And she said, yes, for Kagan's information. He said, but you searched the database. He did not reference Kagan Klein's name. Wallace said, yes, I searched the database. Rosie said, for your personal interest. And Wallace said, we had discussions about that case. There's always that interest. Rosie then talked about sessions and said, your observations and making an assessment. And Wallace said, yes. Then he talked about faking and not faking. I do not have any answer from Walla. Rosie said, objectively, can you objectively test to help determine in those situations if somebody is faking or not faking? Walla said, yes, there are those tests, but they did not have them at the Department of Corrections. Rosie said one reason that you would destroy your work notes was for privacy, and Wallace said yes. Rosie talked about Richard Allen had video in his cell. He did not have any privacy, and Wallace said, yes, it's true. He did have a video in his cell. Rosie said, you talked to staff about your interest in the case. Wallace said something like, when somebody would come to the RDC, Reception Diagnostic Center, we would talk about where they were going. So I think maybe they have like I don't know, it seemed like she was talking about maybe a conference call, and maybe Kagan came up and then she looked about him on the database. I'm not exactly sure where she was going with that. Rosie's final question. Did you ever tell anyone you worked with that you visited the crime scene? Walla said it wasn't the crime scene, it was the bridge. And she said, yes, Delphi and the bridge was on the way to where I was going on a certain trip. Time for quite a few jury questions. Number one, with the diagnosis of psychotic, would that disorder reappear after returning to normal? Walla said, I suppose it can. Jury question number two. It talked about brief psychotic disorder. Can that occur repetitively? And Walla said no. Rosie piped up and said something about if somebody has major depressive disorder. I did not hear his question or the end of it, but Walla said yes. Number three, would Richard Allen know the process of the 3 versus the 4 meals that he's refusing and the consequences? Walla said, I talked to him about it. Then Rosie said, if an offender goes on a hunger strike, that is one of the only things they can control about their situation in prison. And Walla said, possibly. We're almost done. 3 more pages. Page 207 of 209. Question number 4. Relevance to grave disability. Something about involuntary injections like this Haldol. Walla said one of the prongs to getting involuntary medication. Something about disability is one of the factors, and Walla said yes. Richard Allen received his other reasons than grave himself, take care of himself. My camera, it seems to be black and he said, what happened more than once? Or no, Rosie said happened more than once. And Walla said maybe 2 to 3 times, which I'm not sure what they're talking about. Maybe these involuntary injections of Haldol. Next juror question is, did Richard Allen come to Westville on medication? Walla said yes, we tweaked it while he was with us. Diener said, what medication was Rick taking for mental health? Prozac was the answer. And she talked about, you said tweaking it, and Walla said, I think we changed the dosage. Rosie then said, did you offer Prozac or the generic version of it? Walla said, they just call it Prozac. The next juror question, do you screen for delirium? The answer was no. Diener said, but Rick was assessed for delirium. Walla said no. Rosie said, you guys have, I guess mental health professionals have objective testing for delirium, but apparently, I think Walla said they did not have the resources at Westville. Second to last juror question. When was Richard Allen diagnosed with anxiety and depression? I believe Walla said when he was a teenager. Final juror question. Does Department of Correction require complete medical records or self-reporting when somebody becomes an inmate at their prison? Walla says we often don't have a complete medical history. A lot is from self-reporting. Rosie said, but Rick signed a release to get his psychological records. Walla said, no, just his medical records, not psychological. So this time we took a break and I wrote, Richard Allen yawned. Richard Allen yawned twice. Richard Allen yawned 3 times in 15 minutes. He doesn't cover his mouth. My mom would yell at him to cover his mouth because obviously she yells at me for not doing it. Moving along. Here we go. Second to last witness. Let me update my banner at the bottom. It's Steve Mullen, I think for his third appearance. He's the Carroll County Prosecutor's Office investigator. This was pretty quick, so here we go. So McClellan said, the other day we talked about the Hoosier Harbor Store video, and we reviewed exhibits 233 to 243, which are screenshots of this car going by the Harbor Store in the direction of CPS at 1:27 p.m. on the day of the murders. McClellan to Mullen, do you believe that car matches Richard Allen's? Mullen said, I do. So McClellan said, the other day, there was a question from the jury, did you search the Bureau of Motor Vehicle Records to see how many cars in Carroll County were a 2016 Ford Focus that matched Richard Allen's? So McClellan said, since your testimony a few days ago, did you follow up? And Mullen said, yes, we did a search of the Department or the Bureau of Motor Vehicles for a black 2016 Ford Focus Model SE registered in Carroll County and the surrounding counties. So then Exhibit 305 was a certification of the Bureau of Bureau of Motor Vehicles records signed by the Commissioner of the Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles. So McClellan said, you reviewed the document and there are 31 entries on the spreadsheet. Mullen said, yes, but it includes registration from the year 2018 and 19. And Mullen said, yes, but obviously that was wrong. So McClellan came back and said, I misspoke. This document is from records for 2016 and 2017. Mullen said, yes. McClellan again said there's 31 entries, but you can take out duplicates, which reduces it to 18. Yes. And that is the 2016 black Ford Focus SE. And Richard Allen owned that model. So then McClellan talked about a list of different models and how many of those are, I guess the entire list included different models of the 2016 Ford Focus. He asked how many were the SE model registered in Carroll County and surrounding counties? 8. How many were registered in Carroll County? 1. Who did it belong to? Richard Allen. So here comes Auger with her questions. She said, people from other counties can visit the trails. Mullen said, yes. Auger said, there's not a gate that says only people from Carroll County can use these trails. Mullen said, no. Auger said, you can't tell the model on the vehicle or on the video. And Mullen said, I cannot see SE written on the back of the car. She also said, you can't see it's titanium. He said, I cannot. She said there are similar body types and which years have a similar body type to that 2016. And Mullen said 2011 to 2018. Auger referenced another spreadsheet that has another 65 Ford Focuses. Mullen said, I'm not sure how many there are. Auger said, I counted it. Why couldn't you? Then Auger said, you could have presented it, that other spreadsheet today. And Mullen said, it's up to the prosecutor what to present in the courtroom. McClellan said, you reviewed that other list, and Mullen said, yes. How many Ford Focuses were registered in Carroll County? Mullen did not recall. Again, McClellan said, do you believe that vehicle matches Richard Allen's? Mullen said, I do. Auger came back again and said, but you can't see the license plate. Correct. You can't see the model. Correct. You can't see if it's a titanium. Correct. Auger said there's at least 76 other Ford Focuses, and at that point, McClellan objected and said, that is not what the document shows, and Gull sustained it. Jury question number 1. Are the rims on Rick's car specific to Rick's model car? Mullen said, I can't answer, but the SE model does have the choice of rims which matches what is on Richard Allen's vehicle. OJ said, was that package available in other years? And Mullen said he's not familiar. And we're finally at the final page, 209. I have to update my thing. Brad Webber, finally, after many years, speaking publicly. He was wearing overalls, or not overalls, he had suspenders on and a t-shirt. He was pretty casual. Brad Webber, house at end of private drive. So if you don't know who Brad Webber is, his mom and dad, I guess, own the house at the end of the private drive, and they may have been away and he was staying at the house. Or I don't know if he lives there all the time. So he's a resident of Carroll County. McClellan went to the large TV and showed this map. That's the Google satellite image of the crime scene, essentially. And McClellan pointed to it and said, on this TV, is this your residence here? Webber said yes. And you live at the end of this private drive? Yes. In February 2017, you were employed at Subaru. He said yes, the first shift from 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And then he gave the address as 5500 State Road East. It may have been State Road 300 East. I could not hear it. Exhibit 310 to 311, is that you? Webber said yes, and it's his ID work number, so maybe it's his badge and a badge number. On the second page of this exhibit, it shows when you clocked in and out on February 13th, 2017. Did yes. I checked in at 5:41 a.m. I checked out at 2:02 p.m. McClelland, after work, did you go home? Yes. How long does it take for you to get home? Brad Webber said 20 to 25 minutes. So he checked out 2:02. He could have been home by 2:27, 2:30. We'll talk about this in a minute. Exhibit 311 is a photo. Let me look this up. I think he said a Ford Econoville. Please stand by. No, Econoline. I will show this real quick. Should I show it? They did show a photo of his car. It's just like a white van that looks like a serial killer would drive. Say, hey kids, you want some candy? All right, we'll keep it moving. Brad said, yes, I think that's my van in the photo. McClellan said, did you have that in February 2017? Yes. Did you drive this van to and from work on February 13th, 2017? Yes. Baldwin said, weren't you out of town the week before? McClelland objected and they had a sidebar for a while. And then they came back and Baldwin said, you did not drive straight home on February 13th. And Brad Webber was like, yes, I did. Baldwin said, you worked on ATM machines. And Webber said, that's not correct. Baldwin said, but you told law enforcement you did. Webber said, that's not correct. Webber said, I dropped off a trailer. Maybe that was earlier in the day. Yeah, that was earlier in the day. I missed this part because I was writing down my notes, but somebody next to me said, at that point, Baldwin handed a subpoena to Brad Webber on the stand, and that was the end for the day. We're done. What time is it? All right, I'll answer comments for 15 minutes or so. Econoline, thank you. Hi, Deborah, thank you. Let's see here. Hi, Mommy Pastrami. I like your screen name. Yes, the juror questions are very good. Hi, Cindy J. Yes, I think this is a great idea to have the jury ask the questions after the attorneys do. Hi, Wired Awake. Thank you for becoming a member. B. Rob, thank you. You're on a roll. I appreciate it. Solely for the, oh my God. I'm not repeating that. Why do I say these things? Hi, Mitzi. Thank you so much. I appreciate you appreciating me. Hi, Lee. Thank you. Hello, CR. Where are you? Lucky Lee. Thank you. We love Australians. Katja. Dobre something. All right. What do we have here? Yeah. So today, what happened? I don't know. So the timeline, let's talk about this timeline with Brad Weber. I have screenshots, which don't mean anything. Please stand by. I'm looking for, Doug Rice said, her son arrived home about 3:45. I'm not saying this guy was right, but then I have another one where he said, he works at Subaru and didn't get home till around 3:40 that afternoon. And there's one other thing here. The same guy. So he said all these different times, bitter beat poet. No, the owner's son, Brad, was at work, however. He arrived home. I'll wait for the cars to go by. He arrived home shortly after 3:30. So no one was home around 2:30 when Bridge Guy and the girls likely crossed the creek. That's from Bitter Beat Poet on Reddit a long time ago. Not sure exactly where he got that information. Oh, somebody has this photo. I'm not going to show this guy's picture, sorry. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen with the defense subpoena, what is it, giving a subpoena to Brad Weber, and what's going to happen with that. Hi, Stephanie. Oh, good. They're tying all loose ends after the trial begins. I know. It's like, why would they not do that 2 years ago when they first arrested Rick on October 26, 2022? But a lot of these confessions, I don't know. My mind is kind of going to guilty because it's like, why do we have to make excuses for this man? For so long, all I've cared about is who is Bridge Guy and will he ever be held accountable? Richard Allen has told many people, I was Bridge Guy. So why are we not believing him? Why are we trying to come up with excuses why he's not telling the truth about saying he's a child murderer? Like somebody says, I'm a child murderer, but we're like, we're not sure if we believe you. Hi, Jamie Hicks. I want to meet Tom's mom. I bet she is a very lovely lady. My mom's amazing. So is my dad. My mom, when she was 60, she donated a kidney to a stranger. That's, my parents are amazing. Anyway, we'll move on. And my mom was voted class clown and class wit, so she's awesome. Yes. You would like my mom a lot more than you like me. Are we done yet? Frank Zappa 20. This lady might be a kook, but that doesn't change some of the things Rick said. Yeah, I just can't get past for like 9 months between like early April 2023 and February 2024. Rick is writing letters to the warden saying, I killed Abby and Libby, calling his wife and mom saying, I killed Abby and Libby, telling suicide companions, I killed Abby and Libby. Like, why are we making excuses why he might be not telling the truth? Hi, rescue all the dogs. Who's going to rescue all the cats? That was not funny. I'm so weird. Anyway, moving along. So I'm sorry. I now have, let's see, am I at 700? I have 706 unopened emails. Normally I have 0, so that just gives an idea of how behind I am on everything. So don't cry for me, Argentina. Breaking up a little. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is not that great. Hi, Jacqueline. Most psych professionals can detect malingering. So Walla said she thought Rick was feigning or faking. She used the word feigning. But then she said after she left Westville, as she thought about it more, she said maybe he was not. I don't know. Hi, Glow with the Flow. Rick said he placed branches on them after making them cross the creek, got interrupted by a white van, slashed with box cutter. What else do we need? Yeah, I'm not sure if in his phone calls there's going to be more stuff that only the killer would know. I want to know where Rick could have been when he saw this white van, because like what area down the hill would Brad Weber be driving and not see three people, especially like one girl who's possibly totally naked. I don't know that that's very specific, but obviously somebody saying I saw a white van and I was down on the private drive and the guy owns a white van and got home around 2:30. I mean, that does seem like something only a killer would know. Uh-oh, Cindy J is literally side-eyeing all the chatters. So I'm exhausted and I'm leaving Saturday after Saturday session. I just can't do it anymore. I have so little sleep and my hand hurts from writing all day. My butt hurts from sitting in this wooden chair all day. It's supposed to rain next week. I just can't do it anymore. So I apologize, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do about live chats starting for the next 2 weeks of the trial. There are a few other people who are taking good notes. Like I said, if you want a professional review of what's going on, there are these Indiana websites and TV stations that have like 8 to 12 media people who have to take notes and then they share them. So I don't feel like I'm really needed to get information out as much as I thought I needed to be here. So it's been real. High caricature contest. Haldol doesn't last long, temporary a few hours. Thank you for your expertise. Hi, Cece. Thank you. Daisy, hi. I noticed the bulging eyes in court once. Yeah, I think when he was wearing that yellow jumpsuit like a year ago, he did look a hot mess, if I'm putting it bluntly. But as I've said, what a mess. He seems totally normal in court. So how did he turn around? And also, if it was so horrible at Westville, why is he confessing at Wabash in February 2024? Hi, Dee didn't realize he gave himself 2 black eyes. Wow, yeah. Apparently, the defense is going to show some of these videos from Rick's cell where he's self-harming. I don't know. I just don't know what the jury's going to do based on all these confessions and these guards coming one after another saying, this man said, I killed these girls. That's what he's on trial for. So why are we and the jury going to say, I'm not sure that he's telling the truth about being a child murderer? I know a lot of people say, well, he had a mental breakdown. Well, how is a symptom or a side effect of a mental breakdown saying you're a child killer to like 30 people over 9 months? Hi, Robin. Thank you. I'll give her a hug and charge her $5. I saw Shankmeister this morning and I said, good morning. And I smiled at her. She smiled back and said, good morning. I have not told her that I call her Shankmeister. 5 more comments and then we're done. Hopefully next week. Oh, so I'm not going to do a live chat on Saturday, but I will do them on Sunday. And hopefully I'll get, so on Sunday, I'll review my Saturday testimony notes, and I'll have more time to get to more of your comments. Hi, Anne. Somebody said Rick had to deal with all of this, end quote. I really admire the girls' families, dignified restraint. My head would be exploding hearing this. It's like whoever did this, like what good came out of this stupid scenario that unfolded? It's just crazy being that close to Richard Allen, knowing that he's accused of this stuff, and the families of the victims are literally like 15 feet away. As Anne says, like, how do you restrain yourself from not wanting to hurt that person? Three more comments and then we're done until tomorrow. I'm not sure how long tomorrow is going to go. Mommy Pastrami, am I allowed to share a link for clarification on Suicide Watch and the dangers that come with it long term? I'm fine with that. I'm fine with educating people. Although I'm not sure that YouTube allows external links, so maybe it might not post. Hi, Chris. Brad Weber has just put this whole debacle to bed. It's over. Yeah. However, I want to find out. Did I say this before? I think the Ball was saying that Brad Weber serviced ATMs, which I think his family may have like taken the cash out of ATMs as like a side business or something. So I want to know what the defense has to show if Brad Weber is truly not remembering his actions that day. Two more comments. Hi, Unsilent Bob, the Doobie Man. If Rick really did have this complete mental breakdown while in prison, how is he competent to stand trial right now? Shouldn't he be committed and then we're done? Like I said, I mean, they're saying he was absolutely bonkers, essentially. I mean, the things I'm describing, like naked, rolling around in his feces, smearing it on himself, walking into a wall, banging his head. How does he walk into this courtroom every day acting like he's walking into a barbecue? Like he's smiling. I see no signs of mental illness other than the fact that yesterday he was described by these three guards, at least at that point, saying that he is the one who murdered Abby and Libby. And then after the break, he walks in smiling at his wife. After three guys just said he is the killer. That ain't normal. One final comment. What are we going to say? I'm not seeing anything. Hold on. Yeah, you guys like be polite in the chat. Don't badmouth other people. Thank you. I'm looking for it's all this like drama. Sorry for the silence, but I'm looking for one final comment about a topic we have not discussed. Anne says no ordinary inmate would be allowed to act out like this. Nudity, self-gratification in front of civilians, the female Dr. Walla, incredible. This is turning out to be a very bad joke, seems like. I don't know. Rick was not acting normal. So was he faking it? Is he so upset because he lost his mind because of some kind of change in medication? Or is he just freaking crazy naturally and he's upset that he got caught finally for being the murderer of 2 kids? And he's finding out what prison is actually like, and he knows he's guilty, and he knows that he's going to be found guilty, and his every day for the next 20 to 30 years of his life is going to be this hellhole of prison. I don't know. So that's it for today. I do have another live chat scheduled for tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Today we got out at 4, and so I will post a community notice if I get out early, and we'll start earlier than 6:30. Cinder, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, I do need to rest. So I will get a lot of sleep tonight because it's 8 o'clock. I'll be going to bed early. As always, thank you for joining. Sorry I missed so many comments, but I'm busy.